Africa, we are not really sure where it's going, all that. But here, when we talk about sustainability, we impose, DSA impose to ourselves traceability, transparency, and every moment, all the data that we have are on the blockchain and are public. And this is also connected to new technologies. All this, it's possible for the new technology that we have. So yes, it's possible. Yes, it's en route, it's on force. Sometimes I'm very, how you say it, impatient with with the legal and with the authorizations and all this kind of thing that, but it's okay. At the end of the day, we are doing that. And I think that the three things that I can say make it happen, that it's first, we are aligned on the will that we have that it happens. And this is very important. Today, it's easy. Governments, local authorities, investors, big players, institutionals are all agree that it's time to do something. And to secure this kind of project that, yes, it's a state project, but with PPP, because at the end of the day, what we are proposing, it's a public-private partnership. And all this make it happen, all this. And of course, we have a board that every week, every month, we are reporting of what we are doing. Sometimes in the ground, we have surprises, sometimes not. And at the end of the day, I will finish with that because I can talk hours. What is very important here that, again, I'm saying that because I would like to avoid any green financial bashing. When we are looking now with the finance side of all the industry, we are like predators. Oh, you know what, they are offsetting, they are not doing anything, they are there now. It's not the case, not at all, not at all. There is a regulation, there's a lot of things that you can control, you can see, you can track, and we make in our part of the credit carbon that we have, we put 7% in a fund. What is this fund? It's a guarantee fund. If it's the territory that we map and we intervene, arriving floods, arriving what we say natural disaster, okay, what we can do, okay? Last year, we spent almost at the COP27, 15 days, okay, to try to find a solution for the compensation, and we did not. But we put this fund saying that if it's happened, there is a fire, there is a hurricane, whatever it is, we have this fund that will compensate directly what happened. And this is when I said we cannot say anymore that we are just here to make money and to leave the territory without any responsibility. Not anymore at all.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I admire your passion. I think to operate in this space, you need to be passionate because you're in it for the long haul. Yeah. Right? It's not a quick win. It's not an easy investment journey. So I think the passion is definitely required. Just a quick recap of what I heard you saying is that good governance is one of the requirements. And I think you were also speaking to, regular reporting to your board, right, which obviously falls into the governance. And being able to incorporate technology to provide that transparency and visibility to your investors. Just a quick, very, very quick question, Sylvia. So where is the capital flowing from?
It's coming from private sector because we are a boutique.
Private sector in Africa or?
Worldwide, really worldwide.
Right.
We have private sector in Africa, Mines,
right.
the company generally, because what is very important also that today there is a big awareness about the international company that they are in Africa, in the sector of logistics, or mines, oil and gas, for just the big three bigs, okay, that they want to do something impact, but not on the headquarters that they are, I don't know, in United States or France or whatever it is. No, they want to do something in Africa. So now what they are doing, it's coming into our journey, saying, okay, you know what, we're investing, and at the end of the day, part of this offset will come back to us.
Yeah.
And so what is more natural and more efficient, that finally, yes, you are doing something here, but you are investing, compensating, rehabilitation also here.
Yeah.
So now, yes, we have capital from Africa also.
Okay.
Yes, definitively.
I definitely feel like, yes, there's a desire to participate in more, sustainable activities, but I also feel like there's a push, right? I think large companies are really being forced, right, to take accountability and to participate.
They have no choice. This is what they're doing.
We'll take it any way that it comes, right?
Of course.
Whether they're being forced or whether they're voluntarily participating.
Completely.
And Kwesi, I just want to say that I can assure you that we're not going to be bashing banks on the panel. Anytime that there's a conversation around finance, you guys get a hard time because we know that banking in Ghana is not easy. So we're not going to give you too much of a hard time. But I really wanted to move on to speak a little bit more in depth about finance, Percy, because when I was reading through and preparing for this session, if you recall, last year we did some work with the SDG advisory group and developed a concept note for the Green Fund, which was going to be doing a lot of green financing, both at a national level, large infrastructure projects, as well as small-scale SMEs and startups and innovation. And I saw a lot of similarities between the Green Fund and the blue economy and what it's trying to achieve. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Okay, so the work on the Green Fund was basically to sort of put together an instrument that would serve as a catalyst for mobilizing more money towards sustainable development agenda. And of course, as the blue economy is also part of the SDG, it would fall immediately into it, even though we called it green. Yeah. Now we can actually add the blue to it and make it also part of it. But mainly what it is a triple bottom line approach to investing, where we are looking at not just financial, but also social and environmental, which is a very critical point. One of the things or argument that has always been out there is that if we focus too much on the two, which is the environmental and the social, the finance might suffer. But the evidence is not very clear whether that is actually true. Most of the people who focus on making sure that they are good citizens in investment, i.e. making sure that they are sustainable and they are also socially oriented, also get the returns that they need. And so this is why we designed the fund. In our research, of course, in the work that we were doing for the fund, one of the things we wanted to address was the governance structure of the fund. Because a concern for many international investors, especially that are targeted towards climate funding, and you would read the report saying that, well, there's a lot of money out there for some of these SDG projects, climate funding, blah, blah, blah. But it appears that Ghana, for example, is not tapping into it. I think in 2018 or something, we just got about 118 million alone, and it's billions that is out there. Yeah. And one of the critical points is the governance structure of funds and how funds will be deployed, whether or not we have the structures in place to monitor these funds, and whether or not we will be able to see to it that what we intend to do is realized. So that is what we factored into the Green Fund, that we changed the governance structure. It's a public-private partnership. And let me chip this one in here. The national determined contribution for SDGs is quite huge, 20 billion, I imagine. For blue economy is also considerably high. It's a percentage of that, but it's also considerably high. The government cannot do it by itself, even though I believe strongly that the government must pave the way, and in financing terminology would say must perhaps be a first loss leader in providing some sort of basic financing so that people can latch onto it and then use that as a means of bringing more money. It's been done in this country before, where we used some basic money to attract money from the private sector towards a national agenda, like creating jobs, supporting SMEs and entrepreneurship. It can be done in the Green Fund ecosystem as well. But the concern has always been that if we set up a fund that is entirely controlled by government, then there's going to be a challenge. When the public sector gets in, how do we direct it? And so we have designed it in such a way that the governance structure will be participating investors would have a seat on the board, would have a say in what goes on, and there's a very strict reporting mechanism. So in a sense, the blue economy that we're talking about, and when I look at the components of the blue economy, many of them align with the Green Fund, because the sustainability issue is there, avoiding pollution of the ocean is there, and most importantly, as it cascades back to the ground, some of our activities on the ground, especially polluting the water bodies that end up in the sea. All these things are linked. So in other words, the Green Fund as a model for financing SDGs can actually be applied in this blue economy situation where it goes across various sectors. One of the things we designed for this fund, and I'm hoping that Dr. Usu is here when we finish, we'll launch the fund very soon.
We're launching it today, huh? Dr. Usu.
We're very optimistic. One of the things we designed, and which makes it very useful for the blue economy, is this, that it's a fund that provides for other funds to be set up underneath, to be directed towards specific needs. There are investors who might say, well, I'm interested in the blue economy. I'm not really interested in anything else, but I want to focus on the blue economy. We can actually create a fund, put in a seed, and the investors come on board. And then that fund is running under a bigger fund. One of the policies, when you look at the Ghana climate change policy that has been drafted over the years since 2013, is that they want to avoid a multiplication of funds. And so if you have a green fund that actually can assimilate many of these funds underneath and uses a catalyst to attract private sector funding and allows the private sector to lead and direct where the money should go and impose that discipline of expecting results, monitoring and evaluation, it can work. And I believe that is one concept that would be very useful for the blue economy.
I think that's really encouraging to know that a lot of the work has already been done. Yeah, Dr. Usu, we're really putting you to task here. And we have high hopes for the launch of the Blue and Green Fund. Okay, so I was doing a little bit of research about investments into the blue economy, Kwesi, and I was reading a study by Blue Invest, and they were basically saying that there's, I think, approximately 58% of the capital at the moment is coming from both venture capital and private equity, with approximately 3% coming from banks. So I'm assuming that there's some constraints there. I was wondering, is this because the investments require more patient capital, which a bank is not necessarily, set up to be able to provide? And a lot of the time, the finance has really been driven towards innovation to support conservation of the ocean, right? Which sounds like cost. Which, once again, banks are not really structured to be able to support that. But I know from my experience of working with the SDG office, we've been approached by a few banks that have a very specific agenda to support sustainability. So is that something that Fidelity Bank is currently working on? Maybe you could talk to us about the things that you are doing.
Sure. So as a bank, we do have a sustainability strategy.
Great.
It's based on 3 pillars. It's sustainable finance, where what we're doing is we're providing finance to the youth, to women, SMEs, and corporates. The second leg is all about corporate social responsibility, giving back to the community. Then the last piece is how do we ensure that we actually live in the SDG values as a bank? So that's the sustainable operations. Now, as a bank, we cover about 8 of the 17 SDGs.
Okay.
Now, if you notice, we have sponsored this event.
Okay.
So we're serious about sustainability. We want to be part of the blue economy conversation. We know it's new. This is a maiden event. But we also believe that as a bank, being able to drive the whole sustainability agenda will help us, our shareholders, and also the community, and also help the continent as a whole. Now, there are a couple of things I want to bring up about the Blue Invest. So I think it's a great idea. There's another one in Asia, which is the SME Blue Impact Program. That, for me, is a better model in my mind because it joins the SMEs to the investors. What you then do is that because you have this community, any investor can join in, banks, pension funds, anybody else can join in to allow people to understand what people are doing from an SDG point of view. I think historically, I think it was said on the panel before, where people come to banks to pitch an idea, and it's very difficult for banks to understand what that means. However, if you have a platform where people are taught how to pitch their sales pitch on what it means, if they've even been taught how to understand how it fits into the bank agenda, then you have this holistic conversation going. let me just plug this other VC, which I think is Catapult Ocean. It's based in Norway. They are setting up accelerator programs and startups to solve problems for the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's great that we're doing the whole private government, but we need to somehow reach out to a bit more of a wider forum, because the blue economy is not something which is well understood. And from a banking perspective, we used to traditional bonds, we understand it, it gives you a return, it gives you a yield. Whereas if you're talking about something which is about the ocean, where the market prices are not factored into that structure, it is quite difficult. And also, what you also find is that most of the frameworks you have across the organization, across the globe, are not joined up. So you don't have one size fits all to understand what's going on. The other piece which I think is important is that there's not enough data or information about it. So it's very difficult to price these things. But from where Fidelity sits, we definitely want to be part of the conversation, and that's why we're here today. And we've got our, Nanaya is here, so if you can wave for people. So any questions that come to me, just give it to Nanaya. I'm just a mouthpiece. So we are pretty serious about SDG goals, and we want to add the blue economy to it.
Okay, fantastic. During the break, Percy and I were actually talking about innovation within the blue economy, and whether as a country within our own ecosystem, we're really looking to support and nurture entrepreneurs in this space. I mean, we now have a few programs that are focused on green, clean tech, etc. But there are not really any programs that are purely focused on the blue economy and some of the innovations that could, be derived to really support or conserve this space. So yeah, I totally agree. It starts from the grassroots, right? And then we build up and scale from there. And we're running out of time, and I want to leave some time for questions. And I have a couple more questions for you guys, so I'll move on. I don't think we can end the discussion without touching on the point of blue bonds, because I think green and blue bonds are, kind of being touted as being the solution for all of our sustainability issues. The Seychelles are the only African country to actually issue a blue bond, and they raise approximately $10 million. Is this really a viable solution for Ghana? Would there be enough demand for a blue bond, or should we be focused on a generalist approach, SDGs as a whole, obviously with some of the allocation going towards the blue economy? And obviously this is a long-term strategy considering our current economic climate, right? We're not saying that we want to issue a bond in the next couple of years, but from a long-term perspective, is this viable for us?
Okay, maybe I'll go and then you can...
Just 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, the answer is yes, it's viable. It's been demonstrated in several countries. The IFC claims in its reports is done about $1 billion of blue bonds. I think none of them is located in Africa. It's been Southeast Asia mostly. It's possible. And the concept of blue bond is quite straightforward, simple. It's a bond that is based on investments that are targeted towards blue economy activities. It's possible. But we also need to think, I think the question is, in our current climate, given what we know about the bonds and what is happening right now, whether there will be demand. What I have seen from the IFC model that has been done is most of the bonds have been taken up by private sector. So to the extent that the private sector is willing to go there and actually package a bond that is blue. For example, one of the IFC ones is actually a bank, a big bank, one of the biggest banks in Philippines that actually took the bond, $100 million, I think, and is going to use that to push the blue agenda. So if private sector is serious, and I'm glad Fidelity is very serious about that, I hope that other banks would follow suit. There is nothing to stop them from raising a bond of this nature from the multilateral institutions, IFC, CDC, and so on, who want to have a piece of their blue economy investment so that they can use that and cascade down to the people who actually call on them for funding. If we leave that up to government, it's going to take a while. And I strongly believe that with time, government itself can raise a sovereign bond that is a blue bond. But for now, if that is not possible, private sector can set in and push that agenda. So it's possible.
Okay. Interesting. Kwesi, I think you want to add.
Yeah, I think you've covered the blue bonds very well. So I'm going to bring another dimension to it. If you look at climate change in the blue economy, it's all about insurance. Now, we need to start thinking about how we get the insurance companies on board. So I know in the Caribbean, what they're doing is they're giving micro-insurance to the local fishermen, where should something happen to your boat due to a storm or a hurricane, you get paid back. And they're using what they call parametric insurance. So it's the number of events that happen, not the loss that you create. So I know we try and talk about the banks, but the insurance companies have to start thinking about innovative ways to mitigate climate risk. That's something which is important as well.
I think so. It's an ecosystem, isn't it? So one component doesn't work without the other. Sylvia, would you like to add anything to that?
Here I'm really the private sector, and I think that one of the things that we also need to underline is that all this investment or financial instrument need to be connected to projects. And sometimes we are hearing that we have this fund at 500 million, this fund 1 billion, this fund 50 million, but for what kind of project, what is connected to that? And I think that we need also to, we as media also, we need to promote that, to raise the awareness of that, that the people, educated the people to say this bond is connected to this project, and then it's the effort of everyone to put this bond on the success because it's connected to this project. And I think that we need to start a different language, a different wording in this space, in this industry. We need to connect money to project to money. And then we have this vision of what happened with this, what we are going to do with this money and what we are going to do better for what kind of objectives. I think it's very important.
I have to say that I agree. And I think that when we launched the country financing roadmaps at the presidency, one of the key recommendations was a project preparation fund, right? You know, there's a real opportunity for government to step in and prepare, you know, a bouquet of projects, so to speak, and do the necessary due diligence so that investors can come in and, you know, support. So that is obviously still something that's on the table and needs to be addressed. Okay, so I want to open up the floor for questions, so we can just have enough time to do the answers justice, and then we'll wrap up with our final submissions. So I'm not sure who is in the audience moderating for questions.
We have two mics, one to the left and one to the right.
Okay.
Madam Moderator, whoever catches your eye.
Okay, so would you like to raise your hand if you have a question?
There's a hand here to your extreme right.
Okay.
Thank you once again. I'm just going to read a little thing to you first before we go on. A country where you have wealth without work is cursed. A country that has peace without justice is cursed. A country that has education without discipline is cursed. A country that has religion without morals is cursed. Now, producers must get money, and you put all this in their way. I'm going to use Nelson as Katanka is another. How come we're not domesticating their production? It doesn't make any sense. The Koreans, who knew Kia and Hyundai some years ago? Nobody. They were laughing at them. Look at that. That's what they're all buying now. Why are government officials importing SUVs? For what? Let's support our own. I, for one, I don't eat any. If rice is not grown in a very near my hometown, rice is not growing, I won't eat it. Why should I eat it? Everywhere they are protecting their farmers, they are protecting their own production. Here we're importing for what? What do we don't have the money. We're importing wheat. Why are we importing wheat? Why are we importing white sugar? Why are we importing all these things? Why? This is the Garden of Eden. God has given us a tree for healing. You can create a whole economy on ganja alone. You can create a whole economy. $1 billion from there. We just talked about seaweed. Seaweed is another very big thing. I was shocked. One of my brothers from the US called me and said, get me seaweed. I was surprised the amount he mentioned for just a kilo of seaweed. I was saying, so there's money in this thing. So I was pleasantly surprised when it was mentioned here that, seaweed is another. Yeah, we have to look inwards. We have to domesticate everything. Don't eat anything if it's not grown in Ghana. It's not even in your favor. GMO is everywhere. We don't want genetically modified.
Thank you. I don't want to cut you short, but just to allow for other people to also ask or to contribute. I would like Percival to start with a response to this question. And the reason why I say that is because I think oftentimes, and this is not to take away from anything that you said, but I think oftentimes it's very easy to say, why are we not financing our local entrepreneurs? Why is investors not putting capital into this business? Percival, you've tried to invest in, over 100 Ghanaian businesses over the years? I think you're very well positioned to answer this question.
Letitia, since you have 15 minutes left, can I just sample all the questions?
I would like to touch on this. I think it's very important, okay. And then we'll take a couple more. Yeah.
Maybe I would answer that with a story. You invest in a business, an entrepreneur reports to you, it's a poultry business, and he reports to you every day, 400x, 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 400x. Now, what are the chances that a poultry farm would produce 400x every day for about 1 month? You invest in a company that the entrepreneur is working. One day he comes to you and says, you brought this machine, come and take your machine, I'm not interested. And it's an equity investment, so we are in bed together. I don't have any safety gadgets in terms of investment. You invest in another company, the entrepreneur is working with you, and you find that he set up another company and competing with the company that you invested in. I'm saying all this to illustrate that, yes, there has been some programs to support entrepreneurs locally, and this is detracting a little bit from the blue economy, but just to answer the question, the government set up Venture Capital Trust Fund. I'm sure there are other institutions and initiatives, including the now Ghana Entrepreneurship Agency, NBSSI. A lot of times, entrepreneurs are getting support. So sometimes the cry is, we're not getting support, we're not getting support. But when the support comes, when you give the man the money on Friday, when he comes back on Monday and you ask him what the money was used for, it's a different conversation. So let us be realistic with how we characterize whether or not entrepreneurs are being supported. There are some levels of, and I would agree with you to some extent, we need to support the local industry. But when the support comes, and I've been on that road for a very long time, at least 13 years in this private equity business in Ghana, and I've had a lot of experiences with this. When the support comes, it's very difficult to work with entrepreneurs. There are some we work with, but it's very difficult. So as you advise that the local entrepreneurs must be supported, we must also advise, and to some extent train them to be aware of partnership, delivery, results, and returns for everybody who puts money in the business. Thank you.
Thank you. There's nothing that I'm more passionate about. We could talk about this for the rest of the day, but unfortunately we have to take the last two questions before we wrap up.
Any hands? At the back, okay.
Good afternoon to the panelists. I have a bit of concern for blue economy investment. If you look at the sectors within the blue economy, talk of maritime, talk of petroleum, talk of fishing, talk of mining and all that, they are activities that involve a lot of investment. It's not about $1 million, it's not about $2 million. We are talking about billions of dollars. And I don't know to which extent our local banks are in position to fund some of these activities. And you know, these kind of investments rest on research work. You have to fund the research to be able to get the result, to get the inputs you want. So I'm wondering, as a country, as investors or as banks, how well positioned are we to tap into blue economy? I can give you a typical example from my research work that I did in terms of solar salt production along our entire coast. You realize that, I think during President Kufuor's time on special initiative on salt production, I think he gave the private sector about $2 million or about $200 million or so. I'm not too sure about the figure. But you realize that all those people who took those monies, the kind of investment they did along the coast, from Ajua in the western region all the way to Adan in the Volta region, all of them have collapsed. It's only the traditional ones, that is the Songo Lagoon, the Pamblos, those are the ones that are doing well. And even with that, they are not even operating up to their full capacity. They are doing less than 50%. The best is doing about 30%. And we are here importing salt in tons, tonnages. I don't know if our officers at the Maritime will do us the honor by sharing some of these data with us. It's very sad. We are importing salt along the western coast. We are the only country that produces salt. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Please, the banks, help us. When the people come and they are requesting for the funds, you know, you request for financials, you request for productivity, you request for all these things. But you know, these people don't have the requisite skills to keep data of what the funds and all that. So please, I would really entreat the government, the financials, and not only the banks. Some independent institutions have the resources to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have another question here, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. My name is Esther Ijapon, and I think we should take a look at the psychology of empathy when it comes to soliciting for funds. I'm saying this because if you need funds for, say, a project on menstrual poverty or child labor or child marriage, anything of that sort, you are more likely to have people come on board and fund that project because of the empathy attached to such issues in the country, as compared to environmental issues like the ocean action and what we are discussing here. So if you can devise ways to get to the empathetic side of the people that we are seeking for the funds from, I think that will also open up more purses for them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution. And I have to agree. I think that we definitely need more awareness around the importance of our oceans. When I was doing my research yesterday, I found out that the ocean is actually responsible for every second breath that we take in terms of contributing towards, you know, the oxygen, etc. I mean, that's pretty important, isn't it? Without it, we'll all be dead, essentially. So we definitely need to start creating more stories around this. So back to the other point about the government interventions and sustainability of businesses and why are the banks not investing in some of these innovations. I just want to chip in just a little bit, and I made a point earlier about the fact that we're not going to bash the banks on this panel, because just in light to what Percy said earlier, those of us who deposit our monies into banks, I don't think that we want them to be taking bets on new ideas and potential opportunities, right? Banks have to ask for all of that documentation so that they can ensure that when you come and ask for your monies back, they're able to give it to you, right? Now, some banks are able to create certain programs and carve out some funds for them to be able to invest in, early stage businesses or partner with development partners to be able to give out funding to early stage businesses. But I personally don't want my bank banking on innovative ideas. I don't want to turn up one day and they say, sorry, we've lost your money to Ajwa in Cape Coast, who came with a really exciting idea, but she hasn't been able to bring the money back. So the banks are there to finance different types of projects, right? But not necessarily these types of early stage businesses that are just trying to form. So, Kwesi, would you like to respond to that?
I just want to say that they are doing it. They are really doing it. I'm supporting you this time because they are doing it. I'm going to give you a very concrete example in our project. 5 years ago, when we started to map the territory regarding the credit carbon certificate issuing, we need to arrive massively on the ground with drones, with the heavy materials, with time, etc., investing a lot of money with, at the end of the day, a question mark about what we are going to have. And we did it. But the technology today, with satellites, with mapping, with a very specific technologies, we can map the same territory by when we are doing with 2 years, we can do it now in 5 months with the same precision and the same transparency and the same tracking, and we put all on the open data, and we put all in also the blockchain to secure the traceability of the deals after. So yes, it's coming, and yes, the technology is part of this big challenge. But we all in this planet have to be very humble, I think, because all that, the consciousness of all that, it's, let's say, 20 years ago, not even a generation, and we are facing huge challenges. So yes, we can say that we need a new revolution, or we can say, yes, the state are not doing enough. But I think they are in the same path that we are. Let's give them some time. Let's adapt, all of us, of this new situation and new challenges. And I'm sure that, and we are seeing this, I'm really optimistic, and I'm not naive. We are changing our habits, we are changing our way to governance, we are changing a lot of things thanks to this threat and thanks to this revolution coming. So just give us a little bit time to show you that we change, and yes, we're investing, yes, we open up a lot of things, and the results are coming. It's really near us. The next 10 years could be completely, we're going to change. I hope that we can have this summit next year, and we can show you what we did, where we invest, what the result of all that. And every year really we can do that.
Thank you, Sylvia. Tukwesi, back to you.
Yeah, my point to the 200 million investment that was talked about, it's quite interesting to hear that we mention this as if it means nothing. But my point is, where were the learnings? Why did we fail? What did we learn from it? So then you don't learn from it, you don't change, and then you then claim that you need more money to invest in it to fail again. So we need to do some introspection on ourselves and build capacity. Maybe we haven't built the muscles to build businesses in Ghana, which means we need to learn how to train to develop businesses. But this idea of like, I need money, there's a lot more than running a business. There's a whole lot of things you need to understand. The models, what it means, do you understand your terrain? But we don't seem to take the time to do that. We feel like I can walk into a bank, ask for money, and if I don't get the money, the bank didn't give me the money, that means I'm going to fail. We have to change the narrative.
And I think that this has been replicated across multiple sectors, right? This huge intervention, government is supporting this sector, etc. After a period of, a few years, the businesses die off, and then we come up with another intervention. So I agree, it is really time to take stock and to think about and to take note of what those learnings could be. Okay, so I just want to wrap up the panel, Jerry, by just asking for one final comment from all of my panelists. I think we've had quite an interesting conversation, but I'd really like to know, if you were to envision, I was going to say 3, but I'll just say 1, as in like your top of your wish list to foster growth in the context of our panel discussion on oceans today, what would that be? What would that one thing be? And I'll start with you, Percy.
Letitia, so...
Briefly, please.
Okay, so just one thing that I think that a conference like this should come up with is, I just want a vision that is communicated in numbers. For example, Ghana wants to diversify its energy source. We have not tapped into, when we talk about blue economy, wind energy and all that has not come on board. Is it the vision that in the next 5 to 10 years, we would be increasing the mix from 1% to 10% of renewable energy? Or is it the vision that fisheries will contribute more than 5.4% of GDP? Or is it, I want one vision, just one, from here, communicated in numbers with timelines that is going to happen and supported by government. That's all.
Thanks, Percy. Chrissy, what's your top of your wish list?
I'm going to add on to Percy's and say, next year, instead of having these big speeches, let's show what we've done. Just show what we've done. There's no point doing all these presentations, talking about it and not doing anything. We seem to be a nation of talkers. Let's start doing. It's so important.
Members of the SDG office, we are holding you to task. All of the concept papers, we are launching them next year, or this year actually. And Sylvia, just very briefly, your one thing.
I think I just want to meet you next year and to show you what we did in Ghana.
Fantastic.
We are doing. We are moving and we are doing, so I will be pleased to be here in the same place and to show you what we did.
Exciting. I hope we've been able to demystify some of the myths around investment, how much money is there, why the money is not flowing into Ghana, even talked a little bit about what entrepreneurs can do to try and attract more capital. The conversation really could take up the rest of the afternoon, and it's a very important topic, but our time is up, so I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, thank Dr. Owusu and his team for putting together this great opportunity for us to come and speak about what I think is a very important topic, and thank you all for listening and your contributions and your questions. Thank you.
Kwesi Otre Achampong, Sylvia Oriente, Percival Ofori-Ampomah, and Letitia Brown. How about a group photograph together? I believe they deserve another round of applause. Just one photo on stage, please, all of you. Photographers, please, make sure you capture them. Wow. Some amazing insights there. So we move to the last panel for today, addressing the challenge of maritime insecurity, an existential priority. Thank you very much. But Percival, I beg you know the names of God. In all your investment matrix, consider the ganja farmer. Peace. But the ganja farmer would not leave us without trouble, because there will be problem at sea by pirates and all other individuals who are not necessary to the peace and tranquility of our politics. Ladies and gentlemen, it is for this reason why we've empaneled this body of men and women who are here to speak about how we can address the challenge of maritime insecurity, an existential priority. Would you please make welcome the moderator of this panel, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Harriet Nartey, the CEO of Diplomatic Affairs Television. She'll be doing this with Mr. Isaac Opoku Ajay, a political and security advisor, ECOWAS, and regional integration. His Excellency Tom Noring, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Denmark to Ghana. Professor Captain Nana Ofosu-Boateng, Head of Department, Nautical Studies, Regional Maritime University. Dr. Osei Bonsu Dixon, Director of Intelligence Analysis and Acting Director of Security Governance. And the Chief of Naval Staff, Rear Admiral Issa Yakubu. A round of applause for these gallant men and women. Harriet, I'll come for my mic at 4:15.
Hello. Good afternoon to you, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we meet and we are going to continue with our assignments. I'm happy to know that this is the last session as we wrap up on the Maiden Blue Economy Summit in Accra. So I have the right people seated next to me, and humbly they will help us understand what is happening when it comes to maritime insecurity. I've had the opportunity to interact with about 2 of my resource persons on this panel, and so the conversation is not new when it comes to my platform, but this is another opportunity to share with you what is happening from their various offices, so you can have all your questions answered right here. And I'm pretty sure they are more or less like connected when it comes to what they do. So I will start with just learning about your offices so we can put our conversation into perspectives. Is that okay, gentlemen? Thank you so much. Let me start by introducing Rear Admiral Issa Yakubu, Chief of Naval Staff. Good afternoon to you. And also we have the Ambassador of Denmark to Ghana, His Excellency Tom Norin. Good afternoon, Your Excellency. And I also have with us Dr. Osei Bonsu Dixon, Director of Intelligence Analysis and Acting Director of Security Governance. It's good to see you again. Good afternoon. And of course, with us also is Professor Nana Ofosu Boateng, Head of Department, Nautical Studies, Regional Maritime University. It's good to see you again, sir. And of course, last but not the least is Mr. Isaac Opoku Eje, Political and Security Advisor, ECOWAS and Regional Integration. Good afternoon to you, sir. All right, gentlemen, briefly, if you can give us a background of what your offices do when it comes to maritime insecurity, we will very much appreciate it. This, I believe, will set the tone for all the questions to come.
Thank you very much, Harriet. And let me take the opportunity to thank the SDG unit of the Office of the President for this wonderful summit and for inviting me and, for that matter, the Ghana Navy to be part of it. It's very, very timely. I also want to recognize His Majesty Nana Kobunan Ketia, who is my landlord, because the biggest naval base in Ghana sits on his land. Thank you, Nana, for coming. And I want to thank you all, the audience. In terms of maritime security or insecurity and what the Navy does, I want to first of all put it in context before I talk about the roles of the Navy. Maritime insecurity, for the last 2 days, we have talked a lot about the opportunities that we can derive from the blue economy and our oceans and why we need to protect it and all that. But at the end of it, if there is no security, all these other opportunities you're talking about would not happen. It would all come to naught if there is no security at sea. So security is paramount. So I'm happy that we are wrapping up the session on matters of security, which we must all be concerned with. And to set the context, I want to talk about some of the drivers of insecurity in the maritime domain. And first of all, most of it we have covered in one way or the other, because we're talking about the issue of unemployment. When people don't have legitimate jobs to do, they'll probably go into ganja production or piracy or any other illegal activity at sea. And also, we've already discussed the issue about the unsustainable exploitation of our marine resources, particularly fish. The depleting fish stocks are driving our fisher folks into other alternative livelihoods, which includes piracy and other criminal activities at sea. And that is, we must also have an eye on what's happening, in our big neighborhood, that is Nigeria, where I must say that some of our challenges derive from the Niger Delta area in particular. Fortunately, Nigeria has invested very heavily in maritime security under what they call the Deep Blue Project. And because of that, they have been able to take charge of their waters, and the dividends are coming to us all. Piracy has been on the decline in the last 2 years or so. And to give you the numbers, in 2020, the region recorded 132 actual and attempted maritime security incidents. These incidents were reduced to 74 in 2021 and further to 41 in 2022. But notwithstanding this progress, in this year, in the first quarter of this year, it has started going up again. We've already recorded at least 10 incidents, and including 6 kidnappings. And if you say investment in maritime security is costly, those who pay the ransoms will tell you what it takes when there is insecurity. Let me go straight to talk then about what the Navy does. And I was asked this question.
Right. I would have wished we get all of you to tell us about your offices briefly before we delve into the conversation. Okay. Is that okay?
I wanted to talk about what we do. But
okay, so share with us what you do, what your office does, and then we'll move to
okay, Tom. That's what I was just coming to.
Right.
Thank you. So the Ghana Navy is the only agency of government, I would say, that actually has a maritime force at sea to, first of all, defend the country, provide the necessary security, and also to do some regulatory work. There are so many agencies involved, but then presence at sea to do the security work comes from the Navy. It's when we bring these culprits, when we make arrests and come to shore, we then hand over to other agencies. So generally, we do the patrolling, we have the presence at sea with the force to enforce our laws and also to ensure that our maritime environment is safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it's the turn of the Ambassador of Denmark to Ghana. So also tell us, when it comes to bilateral relations between Denmark and Ghana, what is happening in that area?
Thank you, Harriet. I think it comes very easy after the Admiral, because you already set the stage. I think actually the President yesterday set the stage by saying that security and stability in the whole region is directly impacted by piracy and other maritime crimes. So that's the situation we're finding ourselves in. Denmark is a small country, but with a fairly large shipping industry. So we have very, very big interests in this whole issue. If we look at it right now, at any point in time, if I stand on the beach and look over the ocean here, and I see some ships out there, probably 30 to 35% will be Danish operated or Danish owned or Danish flagged. So we have our own interest in being involved here. But we have also been involved. The Danish Embassy has been involved since 2016, working closely together with the authorities in Ghana and in Nigeria. And you mentioned some of the issues are stemming from the Niger Delta. So only natural that we've worked very closely with these countries in developing what we call the Danish Maritime Security Program, where we have, through implementing partners such as UNODC and such as KIPTC and others, have tried to build up a support structure where we could advise in issues such as developing the Ghana and Nigeria national integrated maritime strategies, also as a basis for developing the necessary legislation because this is a complex issue, because we're talking about crimes that are committed outside of the territories of the states in open seas. So how do we deal with that? Most countries do not have legislation that is appropriate to deal with these issues. So this is areas that we have worked with the authorities in these two countries in the past 7 years. We continue to do so. We have also realized that it's not two countries, it's a whole string of countries. Seen from our point of view, it starts further west, but from our point of view, it starts with Côte d'Ivoire and goes all the way to Cameroon. So we have now expanded our program to not only be Ghana and Nigeria, but also the other countries in that region. We've expanded it in time, so it's now a 5-year program going on from here. And in scope, so we were very much focused on piracy to begin with, but we also realize that there's more happening out there. Again, as the President said yesterday, piracy is a threat, but so are other maritime crimes such as illegal trafficking of weapons, of drugs, of human beings. All this impacts on the safety and security of the countries in the region, the coastal states, but also, and we can get back to that maybe later, it impacts directly on the economy of the coastal states. No safety on the seas means no trade. Little safety means little trade. A lot of safety means a lot of trade, and trade is what makes the world go around at the end of the day. So I'll stop there, but we have a quite extensive program. We can go into details later.
Hello. Okay, so Harriet, I think your preeminent question has to do with what exactly our agencies do. So if you pick, for example, the Ministry of National Security, it draws its preeminent rights of existence from Article 84 of the 1992 Constitution, which looks particularly, if you read from 83, the setting up of the National Security Council, and then also those functions that are enumerated over there. So if you pick the preeminent one, which has to do with assessment, consideration of policies of relevant to security, then at the superannuated level, or the very high level, strategic level, that's where the Ministry of National Security sits. Now, most of the things, for example, that Admiral, for example, has made mention, quite true. And we normally would come in terms of where coordinative effort is necessary. So, for example, if you pick our instrument, Act 1030, you would find that the National Security Coordinator's Office is then deposited within the Ministry of National Security. His job is largely the coordination of the function, not to do it necessarily, but then to coordinate the doing of those actions that are specified for other agencies, bilateral agencies, multilateral agencies, and so on and so forth. A preeminent role that we also play is also the domain of intelligence, the intelligence feed, the monitoring, and so on and so forth. We do so internally, that is domestically. We do so externally, we do so regionally, we do so internationally, and we do so with various partners. And we use various means, human intelligence, signals intelligence, imagery intelligence, and these imply that we need deep collaboration with different sectors. It can be academia, epistemic communities, and so on and so forth. Also very important is an area that is deeply cardinal to the work of security. That is knowing where you are going, strategy development. You would notice, for example, that when the President came yesterday, he made mention of the National Integrated Maritime Strategy. Now that document is a document that arose out of work coordinated by the Ministry of National Security in alignment with the Ministry of Transport and other agencies of state, including also the defense and academia and so many. But then we focus on making sure that the country has at least a vision, a Bible, a Quran, a security Quran that it would actually run with. And that is where strategy making comes in. One last point, two that I'd want to raise, has to do with the crisis issues that bedevil states. So every state will be bedeviled with crisis. In when we have our share of problems, the National Security Ministry or the National Security Council Secretariat becomes a forum for understanding, for setting up joint intel committees, for setting up means of resolving those ones. So that area would come largely under matters to do with incident response, where we have to coordinate with our partners, our friends, those who are not our friends, and so on and so forth. And maybe lastly, maybe I just need to add this one, that we also are in the area of critical infrastructure protection, because that is a preeminent thing that all states must do to secure your citizens and to secure also the facilities of state that are part of your national power. So these are areas that I'll leave the rest, I think, as we move ahead.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Sometimes I find it a little bit difficult to know which hat I have to put on, because I'm both a ship captain and an academic, so sometimes it's a little difficult. But I want to start by saying this. The Regional Maritime University is a regional university. By its status, it means that we're not just one entity, but we have 5 countries that consist of the university. So we have Cameroon, which is a member country. We have the Gambia, we have Ghana, we have Liberia, and Sierra Leone. So with 5 countries in there. Now, I want to say this real fast. We are an MET, and by MET, I mean that we are Maritime Education and Training Center. So that, for me, I would say that is where everything starts, because we train people to occupy or to take professions at sea. Of course, sometimes we have people coming in from the Navy and other places. So in my professional capacity as a ship captain, of course, not only that, but we also train chief engineers, also people to man the engines of ships and other domains that are relevant to shipping. So I would want to say that we mostly are engaged in capacity building, right? And we've really had some collaborations in the past with other entities where we have some kind of trainings on the campus. I can give a very vivid example, like the SWAMS, which I know the Real Admiral is aware about. And aside capacity building also, we create that awareness from the very beginning for our students to know that the sea space or the sea or the maritime domain that you're going in is a very fragile environment. So that kind of consciousness is giving out from the very, very start. So that is what I'll briefly say. But as to how I stopped sailing and became an academic, that would come later. It's a little story I want to share.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. As you rightly mentioned, and I'm happy to be a beautifully organized program. So I'm with the ECOWAS and Regional Integration Directorate of the Office of the President under the leadership of Ambassador Michael Foriata. In reference to this very summit, we are responsible for coordinating the activities of the Gulf of Guinea Commission at the presidency. And if you are quite aware, and I believe most people are, the Gulf of Guinea Commission is the IGO responsible for coordinating the Gulf of maritime activities on the Gulf of Guinea coast. So our responsibility is really to ensure that the President's vision for the Gulf of Guinea Commission, which he currently chairs, comes to fruition. One of the fundamental ones is that he appreciates that the membership of the Gulf of Guinea Commission is really nothing to write home about, because if you look at the number of countries on the coast of the Gulf of Guinea and you juxtapose that to the membership, you realize that there's a lacuna, because many of the countries are not part of the Gulf of Guinea Commission. And with the appreciation that without proper coordination and without cooperation, maritime security would be difficult to achieve, because as many of the speakers have mentioned, the sea is vast, you understand me? And even though they are not physical barriers, there are still territorial boundaries in there. So in the event that a maritime crime is happening in one sovereign state, here I'm talking about the ocean, and it moves into the other sovereign states, the legal frameworks that is needed need to be put in place properly. And when all the countries are part of the Gulf of Guinea Commission, that makes it easier. So our office really is one, to advise the President on the way forward, respect of achieving his dream with the Gulf of Guinea Commission. And based on that, I'm on the, I don't know if I should mention it here. an advisory committee with the Chief of Naval Staff where we are required to ensure that the President's vision is met and maritime security is achieved on our Gulf of Guinea coast. So for my office and what I do, this is what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now that the tone is set for our conversation, that's a lot of information. And I believe as we go on, we will explore further just so we can all appreciate the conversation. It's a bit technical when it comes to what you do, but I also trust you to break it down for us to be able to understand exactly the role your offices play when it comes to maritime security or maritime insecurity. Now, as part of planning ahead of today's program last night, I found something on the internet, and you will be the best person. I can start with you, Rear Admiral Issa Yakubu. It says the Gulf of Guinea is considered the most dangerous shipping area in the world, accounting for most of the maritime kidnappings globally. Now, the negative consequences of this for the region's economy and its people are legion. The economic cost of maritime insecurity is very pronounced in the region. For me, the first line alone is something that scared me when I discovered this information online. Why is the Gulf of Guinea considered to be the most dangerous shipping area in the world? Because we cannot talk about piracy without looking at the Gulf of Guinea. And I know that is a problem in the region. So let's talk about the Gulf of Guinea.
Thank you very much, Harriet. That's why I try to set the context by reading out some of the statistics and to assure all of us that, yes, the Gulf of Guinea had its big blow when it comes to security. But in the last 2-3 years, the trend has been coming down. And I was also trying to give you some of the drivers of this insecurity and the root causes, if you call them, and why we must tackle the root causes. It's true that it is a hotspot, but the trends have been coming down, and we must tell the good story as well as the bad one. It's not as bad as it used to be. So there have been both national, regional, and international efforts to deal with this situation. And we are achieving some results, and we just need to sustain them. And maybe when we come to rate, I hope we will get to it, we'll tell you some of the measures we have adopted, which is leading to some positive results. As I said, unemployment is one of the main issues. And yesterday they spoke about marine spatial planning. We have a lot of developments springing up in the Gulf of Guinea, particularly in the hydrocarbon area, where oil and gas companies are expanding in the space and taking up spaces that are traditionally used to be the fishing grounds for our fishermen. And if we, in the end, kick them out of business, they are going to look for alternative livelihoods. And these are all drivers of insecurity. And this used to be the situation in the Indian Ocean, where they were much, much higher than us. So some measures were put in place, and the situation has shifted into our area. So we have to look at the root causes, some of which I have already enumerated. But the cost is huge if you have time to look at it. So I thank you.
I think we definitely will make time to look at this. Now, let me come to the ambassador of Denmark, to Ghana. Denmark has a very good relationship with Ghana. It is one of the Ghana's development partners. Of course, we do a lot in different ways. But I do know that when it comes to the issue of maritime security or insecurity, it's one of the subjects that you really want to touch on, explain for us to understand. For me, I was asking you the other time, why should a lay person like me, I'm not at sea, I don't have anything to do with the ocean from a distance. That is what I think. Why should I really be worried about piracy? How am I affected?
Well, I think the President said it yesterday and the Admiral said it just now. It has a huge economic impact, negative impact.
Let's talk about
how does that work? Well, to put it quite bluntly, the sea is a huge highway where a lot of ships are sailing. There's a lot of investments going on here. And they're transporting goods. I think the President put it yesterday that, I mean, more than 70% of all trade with Ghana goes by way of the sea. So it is important that that travel, that trade route is safe. If it's not safe, then you can ask any shipping nation in the world and any shipping company in the world, how do they deal with it on their ships? Because they have to recruit seafarers. And they will only be able to recruit if they feel fairly safe. They can't sail if it's very unsafe. Or, as it always is, if something is more difficult or something is more dangerous, the price goes up. And that's where it comes right back to the ordinary Ghanaian. Because when you go to your supermarket or your shop and you want to buy products that are not produced in Ghana but produced somewhere else in the world, they have to be transported by way of sea. And the price will go up. So, to put it bluntly, the Christmas presents for the children this year will simply be much more expensive if the Gulf of Guinea is not safe for the merchant shippers. So that is a very basic consequence. That you can also put it in a different way for the government of Ghana and for the other coastal states. As less will be coming in and out of the huge ports, there will be less revenue. Again, it has a direct impact on the government's economy, the state's economies. So those are two direct consequences that you can measure. Then you, of course, can measure also what does it take to build up a consistent defense against that type of criminality, whether it's piracy or other like illegal trafficking. And that takes time. All the coastal states need to have the necessary capacity to deal with these issues. They need to work together, so there's an issue of regional cooperation. I'm not the judge of that. I'll look at my Ghanaian friends here to answer that, how that works. And then the third part is the international cooperation and how do we deal with it. And the Admiral just compared the situation in the Gulf of Guinea with what used to be the hotspot of piracy off the coast of Somalia, where we now have almost no piracy incidents. Well, there was a huge international effort. And by that, I'm also saying a huge international investment to put a stop to piracy there. There were 3 different international operations ongoing in parallel off the coast of Somalia to stop the piracy there. That worked. At the end of the day, it worked. Here, just to put it bluntly, there's no international cooperation. There's not one. It's not so that the EU has taken the lead. Efforts are being done at this stage. There's no NATO, there's no American coalition or American-led coalition taking the lead to make things work. So right now, there's not a very strong international coordination here. It's nation by nation. And I'm saying that also because we know it from ourselves. We had a frigate here, but that was a national initiative. We had very, very good help from the Ghanaian government so that we could actually operate off the port of Tema with a very good help from Ghana Navy, so we appreciate that. Other countries have to do the same, whether it's Italy, it's France, a few other nations that are off and on active here, but there's no coordinated effort, and that is also something that you need to look at. But that takes a lot of work, a lot of cooperation, and investments at the end of the day.
Right, a lot of work, and I believe we will talk about what needs to be done to ensure that there is coordination in that area, effective coordination in that area. But let me just come to Osei-Bonsu Dixon. You are into intel and information sharing, if I get it right, from your earlier submission regarding what your office, does. Now, I would want us to come back to what Rear Admiral Issa Yakubu said. Now, according to him, the situation at the Gulf of Guinea used to be worse. Is that right? And for some years now, it seems to be getting better. I want to believe a lot of work has actually taken place for the situation to get better or to be getting better. What are some of the things that your office do in terms of intel, information sharing? I believe this is vital when it comes to the current situation regarding the Gulf of Guinea.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, you rightly put it succinctly. We are intelligence collectors, analysts, and then we disseminate this information. Now, the very first thing that we actually noticed in our analysis on maritime insecurity has largely to do with a land-sea nexus. The planning is not done at sea. The planning is done at land. And so a lot of the efforts at criminal behavior on sea are things that we need to actually push a lot of intelligence resources also on land, whilst we actually combat at sea. So there's that connection which I must, at an early stage, make clear to you. And so quite a number of significant efforts are done to look at coastal. You would realize, for example, that in Ghana, about 25% of people live actually around the coast. Almost about 40% of Ghanaians are actually within about 50 to 60 kilometers off the coast. That tells you a story, you understand? And so if you have coastal poverty and so on and so forth, you do have a problem. Ambassador made mention of something I need to reference, which has to do with the migration, of maritime criminality at a gargantuan level from the Gulf of Aden, the area of Somalia, to the area Ghana. And he made mention of a lot of the multilateral efforts by other countries to stamp it down. One of the areas that clearly became, a beneficiary or a shift to a go-to place was the Gulf of Guinea area. We've had problems domestically. Nigeria has also had problems, and a lot of those things had spilled over. And so those had accentuated the challenges I had. So that meant also that, for a very long time, intelligence, the fraternity, community, focused largely on land. So if you pick even for all this audience, if you ask them to tell you about Ghana map, everybody will draw like a sack, the land shape of Ghana. Nobody thinks about the sea. And somebody terms that sea blindness. That is also something that within even the security services, worldwide, not only in Ghana, there's that kind of thing, to think and focus on land, whilst your extent of your territories actually includes the sea. You would realize, for example, that after our differences with Cote d'Ivoire that were resolved at the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, today our sea space is twice our land space, or even more, and things like that. And that has also brought its own challenges. But another thing has also occurred. Right from 2010, for example, to today, we have seen extensive investment in subsea infrastructure. We've seen extensive investment into exploratory work. We've seen all those kinds of things have also attracted all sorts of miscreant people. And so, Ghana and Africa is under serious criminal threat at sea, because of the attractions that these things. If you are going to talk about telecommunications, they have to pass in cables, and they are all at sea. A lot of the fiber optic cable are passing at sea. Those doing explorations are there. Those doing alluvial research are there. So the sea is actually, just like you see land galamsey, if you go to sea, a similar inflection of it is also to be seen also over there. that accounts for it. So in terms of intelligence, I mean, these are things that we've made mention of. And so apart from those infrastructural issues, which are clearly now accentuated at sea, that is it. One other thing, too, that I think has also kept us a little back has been also that when you are looking at security, you must look at it within an interlinkage of networks. And so around 2017, 2018, the National Integrated Maritime Strategy, a concept, an idea was born that we should be looking not only at nominal physical security, we should be looking, for example, at ocean governance. Objective number 1, ocean governance. Objective number 2, we should look at safety and security at sea. That is SOLAS, the Convention on Safety of Life at Sea. We should, Maple Convention, we should pollution. So objective number 4, environment. Objective number 3, we should be looking at blue economy. So what you're doing, what we're having here is actually something that is born out of a document I would like to just, which the president of Ghana yesterday mentioned and told that the names is part of the strategic documents of Ghana. Unfortunately, if you look at it, you see objective number 3 being the names. If you go further, you have number 5, which deals with environment, and number 6, which deals with regional and international cooperation, which is what I believe the ambassador here was talking about. What we have not done over the period has been to give the full life as it should be to the document. The document is still under consideration stage. But I think that we take it today, that one of the benefits, Dr. Owusu, one of the most important benefits of, how do you call it, the NBE summit is that when the president came here and he read his speech, one of the things that we recorded was that it's now part of the strategic documents of Ghana. So maybe from here we just go to launch it. So just to conclude on one of the things that we are doing, we are also doing something we call enhanced security capacity building within the security services, the intelligence services, the enforcement agencies. And one particular thing that we can talk about is something we call the case tracking system, so that if somebody commits some criminal act at sea, we can easily know within the intelligence community, within YOCO, within the Navy, and so on and so forth. I think I satisfy you now.
You did, right. So the document, which is key to today's discussion, we'll talk about that particular document. So I'll come back to you on that, please. Now, moving on, let me speak with Professor Nana Ofosu-Boateng, Head of Department, Nautical Studies, Regional Maritime University. Now, I do believe that if you want a career in maritime, your institution is the go-to place for knowledge. Theoretically, you study in the classroom, you are well armed with what happens regarding your line of duty, the technicalities, and all the things that you need to actually master the art in this area. I'm talking about maritime. What are some of the things that you have in place to ensure that these people or people who go into maritime as a profession are well equipped with the right information to contribute to maritime security or insecurity?
Thank you very much, Harriet. One of my answer is going to be twofold, right? The first part is going to be about the training that we have. And then the second part is going to be about my personal experience, which I promised that I was going to tell. With regards to maritime education and training, that is the training that we give to students who come there, it's very, very varied. It's very, very varied. And it's not only using textbooks, but we do have simulators that we use to simulate actual situations at sea. For example, we have this automatic identification system, which is used at sea, and it's also used to track vessels and their movements and stuff. We do have a radar on board, which we also have the same radar on the campus, which the students use for training. Aside this, we occasionally have field trips. Sometimes we engage some vessels that come to the ports on practical visits and stuff. So before a candidate is going to finish the school, He's all round and he knows the kind of domain that he's going to work in. Aside that, with the advent of piracy all around us, we try to psych them that as the navigator, you are going to be in the line of fire, because whatever it is, if pirates notice that this vessel is filled with merchandise that is of interest to them, and of course they do have information to that, so they would make the run, chase the vessel, overpower it, and at the end of the day, if we don't have luck on our side, we're going to have fatalities too. Some of the crew are going to be killed, some will be taken for ransom and stuff like that. So we tell them that it's not all merry and gay out there, but sometimes you can be caught in this situation, of course. And in such a scenario, you have to engage in your best practices that you've been taught at school, that you have to engage in. Again, with regards to myself, actually, I never wanted to veer into the maritime security space. That was not where I started from. Actually, my master's program was in maritime safety and environmental administration, so that was where I started. Of course, it's also linked to the blue economy, so the environment. But when I was looking for a topic to do for my PhD, I really didn't know what to really do about it. And that was where the aha moment came, because I was on the ship and I was enjoying the fun and traveling and stuff, but I didn't really know when to quit. Then I was chased by pirates. I was really chased.
You were chased by pirates.
Yes, in the Gulf of Guinea. It was a very interesting experience. You wouldn't want to encounter it. So after that beautiful encounter, I said, oh, so now I have a topic for my PhD. So that's wonderful. So that was the research I did for my PhD. And from there on, I've always been involved in maritime security. And so I really speak passionately to it because I was a victim of it. So I know what I'm talking.
Right, out of the bad situation came something good. Well, here you are today, and we are hearing you when it comes to what your institution does. Now, let me talk to the gentleman who is in charge of ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. I'd like to find out from you, do we have a common policy at the regional level to fight maritime security or insecurity?
Okay, thank you very much. So when it comes to maritime security, ECOWAS and ECAS came together. ECAS is the Economic Community of Central African States. They came together and came up with the Yaoundé architecture, eventually the Yaoundé Code of Conduct. That has been the framework that guides the region when it comes to issues of maritime security. And it's very important when you look at it from the perspective. See, over the few years, there's been a shift of maritime crime from the ECOWAS region into the ECAS region. I'm here to buttress the point of proper coordination here. You realize that in the year 2000, the fourth quarter of the year 2000, only 20% of maritime crimes were recorded in the ECAS region. But in the year 2021, 62% of the crimes were recorded there. Should ECOWAS member states be happy? Of course not, because the fluidity of crime on the sea, and here I'm even talking about piracy and armed robbery at sea, not talking about potentials of oil spills, not talking about issues of chemical pollutions of the sea from industrial work, even not talking about sewage pollution of the sea. I'm even talking about piracy and armed robbery at sea. Just these two crimes highlight and again elevate the need for a coordinated effort among the countries of the Gulf of Guinea Commission. So to directly answer your question, yes, there is a Yaoundé architecture or the code of conduct. Barring its difficulties, I think it's the best we have. And thanks to Ghana's contribution, together with Norway, with coming up with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2634, you would realize that there are a lot of guides that is supposed to help in terms of the regional maritime security architecture framework. One of it is harmonization. I have difficulty when I talk about individual architectures. I believe in harmonizing all these architectures to create a comprehensive and solid framework. And that was a recommendation that we found in the UN Security Council resolution. And today sitting here, I'm very happy because another leg of the council resolution was ownership. And Ghana's, what the president said yesterday and has been echoed by my good brother here, the acceptance of the National Integrated Maritime Strategy seeks to check box the ownership part of maritime security. So in as much as there is a regional architecture, which I've mentioned, the national architecture is very important. And again, the harmonization of these various architectures. How does Ghana's integrated maritime strategy seamlessly moves into that of the Yaoundé architecture? How does that of Togo does same? How does that of Cote d'Ivoire, how does it do same? How does that of Benin, Senegal, Angola, all these countries on the Gulf of Guinea coastline does same? So it's not about what Ghana or what one sub-region does, it's about what we are doing as a collective. And thankfully, we have the African Integrated Maritime Strategy as well. So at the end of the day, we are not looking at what my region is doing, but we are going to look at how all these various architectures seamlessly ties into each other. Because when you're looking at the sea, and it's 70% of the landmass of the earth, we cannot joke. Because if 70% of your property is at risk, then the 30% is just not safe. So I think here we can use the political thing of if the safety of the earth is not guaranteed unless it's tied to the total safety of the sea as well. So I think that's what I would say with respect to your question.
Right. Will it be fair for me to find out from you as someone who is in part of the ECOWAS team, if I may ask? Let's talk about this with the African Continental Free Trade Area, with respect to the African Free Trade Continental Area. Let's talk about this regional pact. I want to continental pact. I want to find out, isn't this going to affect what we want to achieve at the end of the day with the continental pact?
See, again, harmonization comes in. When Africa, at what it stands now, is a net importer of most of the things we do. Even when we are talking about interstate trade or intrastate trade, you would realize that most of our trade activity will have to use the ports. So if after should be realized, and this is me reaching too far, we cannot underestimate the safety and security of our waters, because we are moving goods, we are moving services, we are looking at, building one continent. Communication comes in. As my brother already mentioned, almost all the cables when it comes to communication, internet, 95% of them go through the water. An adventurous pirate finds a way of blowing it up. Where do we stand? Even WhatsApp, when WhatsApp goes down for you can see the message. So this is how everything is interlinked. The success of AFTA cannot be chopped independent of maritime security. So I believe when we look at it from this bigger picture, then the issue of who supports maritime security is, that gap is closed. AFTA is critical. We've seen the numbers in billions of dollars. How does it link into maritime security? The interconnectors of the various architectures and all that could be achieved. So I would say that after maritime security, there is a relationship there. So we need to fix maritime security. Not that if we don't fix it, we can't achieve after at all. Definitely we will make some wins. But ensuring that our seaports are safe is very critical. Let me give you this example. I was reading and I came across this very interesting fact. It says that every dollar that pirates make, it equates to $172 loss in terms of port fees and $1,200 in terms of tariffs. And from the research I was looking at, pirates make approximately 4 million, just in the Gulf of Guinea space. When you do the math, you see the amount of money the various governments are losing. So as we seek for development inland, we are losing the money at sea. Again, highlighting the need to have a look at maritime security. So that's how they all fit in. Thank you.
All right, I'll come back to you, but let me come back to Rear Admiral Issa Yakubu. Let me find out from you the collaboration, because I do know that you do a lot of collaborations with other stakeholders. I do know that you have something going on with the Danish embassy as well. Let's talk about the various forms of partnerships in this area.
Thank you very much. if you permit me, even just before I go into that, let me say that I initially talked about the downward trend of piracy. And some of the strategies we used didn't, because it's very expensive to run a navy. The ships are capital intensive, and for the Ghana Navy to put one ship at sea for 24 hours costs a minimum of 5 million cedis. This kind of investment cannot come from the government alone. And so we are very thankful to our partners. Ambassador Tom Noring is here. They have massively supported the Ghana Navy, particularly in the areas of capacity building and equipment support. We have what we call the Special Boat Squadron. They are specialized in particularly dealing in piracy in particular, and we are collaborating in that. They always have their people here, and recently, if you read in the news, they donated some vehicles to us and then some boats, and they are here training with us and working with us. The US government has recently given us 2 fast intervention boats, and as we speak, there are 2 fast patrol boats, bigger ones that are at sea coming from the US. And also, so we have a trilateral agreement between the Ghana Navy, Denmark, and the US to help build the capacity of the Navy. But our own government has not done badly. In recent times, the government has procured 4 offshore security vessels, 4 fast intervention vessels, and I must say that they are in the process of even procuring 2 offshore patrol vessels, which are much, much larger ships that can even take an aircraft. And I must say that even in the midst of our economic crisis, the government is still committed to that project. And they are called offshore patrol vessels, and they are going to come in. They are part of the, I believe, I've been told they will be part of our priority projects for whatever program we are going into. But what I'm trying to say is that it is quite expensive to run any, but we need to be at sea. We need to have that presence, and it is important. And some of the innovative ways we have also adopted because of the gaps in having enough ships is I have one story. The Tuna Association of Ghana, I believe they are represented here. At the time, they were so vulnerable when it came to this piracy because of the way they operate at sea. And in the year 2019, 2020, they were the main targets of piracy. And so they went to His Excellency the President and threatened that if nothing was done about it, they were going to pull out of Ghana completely. So I was called and asked what we could do about it. So the innovative way we did was just to put armed guards on board those vessels. And for 3 years now, we see, if they are here, they will tell you, we haven't had any issue to do. They are operating very safely. Nobody has been able to attack them. So we are not just talking, we are also doing. And there has been, Lawyer Dixon talked about the National Integrated Maritime Strategy. Inside that strategy is a funding mechanism he has not mentioned. It recommends the setting up of a maritime security fund, and that funds should come from some of the security fees that are already taken from ships for security, but maybe the use, we don't know how the use goes, and licensing fees, and also all fees from maritime industrial activities, and also even a percentage, maybe a small percentage of the annual budget funding amount of oil revenues should be put into this maritime security fund to support all maritime security agencies. So if we launch that strategy, as Lawyer Dixon is saying, And that Maritime Security Fund is set up. It will put us in a pole point to be able to deal with our situation.
Right. So it tells me that the Ghana's development partners, of course, and Ghana have a solid relationship when it comes to that area. But also, you patrol our oceans, is that right? Let me find out from you, when you apprehend these pirates, what do you do with them? Is there a law in place? Is there a policy document, something? What do you do with them?
Thank you, Harry. Excellent question. But just before I go, I should do Norway the right thing, because they have also been very supportive in our capacity building, particularly through the UNODC. And I've had some meetings with the ambassador. They're coming, they have some other funding mechanisms they have for us. But to do this, yes, whatever you do at sea, if you do an arrest and you can't have a legal finish, then you haven't done anything. Maybe Lawyer Dixon should be talking about this.
I'm coming to that.
But Ghana and Norway, if you look at the UN Security Council resolution, it talked about 2634, actually called for all countries in the Gulf of Guinea to domesticate these piracy laws in our domestic law. Unfortunately, only a few countries have succeeded in doing it. Ghana is in the process. I know the law has been drafted, the bill has been drafted, and it's in the process of getting enacted. And I believe, since we are a co-sponsor of a resolution that calls for domestication of this law, that we should do our best to get it done as soon as possible. So this goes back to the SDG unit to do their best to help us get these laws in place. I believe if we did it, the incident with the Danish ship that we had wouldn't have happened, because we didn't have any laws to be able to try the pirates.
Right. Jerry is already standing, just to tell us we don't have much time. But I believe we will have about 5 minutes just to take a couple of questions. Is that right? Because this is a very interesting conversation. Now, let me come to, I'm still on the draft. I will come to Lawyer. But first, let me speak with the Danish ambassador to Ghana. Your Excellency, what is happening between the two governments when it comes to the draft? What is happening in that area? He says it's going through a process. I mean, it's been how long? I have been following this conversation. We want to see us do and not talk and walk away. So what are we doing? The next year we meet here, we want to make sure that we have a policy in place that actually put these things in check.
Well, to put it quite bluntly, there has been a lot of talk. It seems the president yesterday started the doing. And when the president does that, maybe that's a good thing to follow on to. What I heard from Dr. Dixon is that the National Integrated Maritime Strategy is now out of the drawer. So my only hope here would really be that you keep it out of the drawer and make sure that it gets whatever finalizing stamp you need to put on it. Because, and that links to the other question that you just discussed with the Admiral, if you do that, you also have the platform for finalizing the work on strengthening your legislation in order to be able to tackle the issue of what do you do if you capture pirates on the open seas, because that is still an issue that is pending a solution. So I think we could actually say that in 2 days or in 24 hours, a lot of talking has been turned into doing. If that is actually the case, it's out of the drawer. So that would be a fantastic thing seen from my point of view. And as the Admiral said, we would not be in the same situation as we were a year and a half ago, where we did get into probably the most robust action between a foreign navy and pirates, which led to killing of several pirates and also the arrest of several pirates, but also left us with what to do. Had Ghana had a proper piracy legislation to handle the issue, I think we would have been in a very different place.
Lawyer, why are you keeping the documents in your drawer?
I'm not keeping it in the drawer. I think, so in points of fact, I'll be brief because so there's currently a variance between our domestic law on piracy and that of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is the UNCLOS. UNCLOS 111 has a different definition of what piracy means and its incidents. Do not forget that our law was crafted in the 1960s, and so had a very different nuance. It has to occur with crew members and also a shipmaster, and limits it at that. So if you have a secondary vessel or a tertiary vessel that is involved in committing piracy act, you can have legal cracks. Lawyers can find a way of, finding leeways for people. So that is why we have difficulties. But currently, I think that the AG's office is fine-tuning these kind of...
How long has it been?
Laws, to be honest, because of the consultative processes, it might take roughly, I don't know, but probably, I suspect between the next about 6 months to...
The next 6 months?
I suspect.
The media is here. I'm here as well. We will hold you to your word.
So what you should do
right.
is to help us with also the advocacy. That is what you should do. Don't be a spectator. Join us.
Unfortunately, you have only 1 minute for advocacy right now.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. As we wrap up, though, let me ask Prof, briefly, for the sake of time, briefly. Let's look at data when it comes to maritime security. What is the Regional Maritime Institution doing, university doing when it comes to data?
Well, as an MAT, or Maritime Education and Training facility, we don't really keep data. That's not in our domain. We are mostly doing the education and training aspect. But of course, we do let our students know that these things are happening, piracy acts and stuff. We do let them know, but we are not in the capacity to be keeping data on some of these things.
Research.
Yes, of course. Like what I did, it was a pure research that I did, and after that, it would end up in my school's library for use or something. So.
All right. So we can expect students to also contribute from that angle. Is that right?
Yes. If you decide to do a research on a particular topic, why not? You can always do it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me take your final words. I'll begin with you as we wrap up, please. We are done.
I would say that the issue of maritime insecurity, we are in this phase where we cannot underestimate the cost of it and its impact on the general world populace. So in terms of all policy, research, all actors that are involved in the maritime security space, this is the time to step up, put up our best so that we nip this insecurity in the bud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wish we could take questions, but I've been told we don't have. I know, I see so many hands. Jerry, do you see them as well?
I see them.
Okay, what are we doing? Nothing?
We will send them via email.
My apologies. It doesn't look like we have time to collect your questions. But I do believe that you can identify with our resource persons right after they are done from here. You can approach them if you have anything you want to find out regarding this particular topic. You can always approach them, and I'm sure they will take you through all of it. Thank you so much. Let me just one more time introduce them as we wrap up. Rear Admiral Issa Yakubu is the Chief of Naval Staff. Thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Osei Bonsu-Dixon, Director of Intelligence Analysis and Acting Director of Security Governance. Thank you so much. And Professor Nana Ofosu-Boateng, Head of Department, Nautical Studies, Regional Maritime University. Thank you so much. And His Excellency Tom Norin, Ambassador of Denmark to Ghana. Your Excellency, thank you. And of course, Mr. Isaac Opoku-Ejay, Political and Security Advisor, ECOWAS and Regional Integration. Thank you so much for coming, even though my panel is not balanced, but unfortunately we couldn't talk about that. I want to see more females also contributing to some of these conversations. Well, thank you so much for paying attention and being part of the conversation.
Harriet Nate, CEO, Diplomatic Affairs Television. Thank you for your stellar moderation, a group photograph together, and then we move to the throes of today's event. Shortly, we get into the closing ceremony where we hear from our eminent traditional ruler, the Omahene of Esikado. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise for you. A VVIP joins us with a big announcement. It is now time for us to hear a summary of all that we've talked about since yesterday. We call them the outcomes. Please welcome the Deputy Director and Advisor, SDG Advisory Unit, Dr. Felix Ado-Yobo. A round of applause for him.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And once again, I say a very big thank you to all of you. Indeed, the past 2 days has been very wonderful, very insightful, and for some of us who are not used to the ocean, very eye-opening. A lot has been said, and I want to leave us with 5 key points from all the discussions we've had since yesterday. Firstly, it's very obvious to us that the ocean is a lifeblood for our country and an instrument for economic prosperity. And therefore, 1, we all share in the vision of safeguarding the ocean for a sustainable future. It is therefore important for us to make sure that the ocean is very healthy, and through that we can address critical issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, livelihoods of coastal communities, and national prosperity. 2, the summit highlighted the importance of collaboration and multi-stakeholder partnerships in ocean conservation and management to drive transformative actions as well as sustainable ocean action. Thirdly, this summit has emphasized the need to protect marine biodiversity, combat marine pollution, promote responsible fishing practices, promote sustainable tourism, as well as the conservation and restoration of coastal habitats. Point number 4, we do acknowledge, and we do fully acknowledge, the impact of climate change on the oceans, and we call for an integrating climate considerations in ocean governance policy frameworks to help us develop resilient coastal infrastructure. And the 5th, but certainly not the least, this summit emphasized the promotion of responsible management of the ocean resources through capacity building, knowledge exchange, and the deployment of science, technology, and innovation. We all must work together, policymakers, traditional leaders, business organizations, civil society, faith-based organizations, indigenes of coastal communities, academia, media, development partners must all work hand in hand to ensure that the ocean is safe for us and for future generations. And to sum it all, we say that the sea is good for SDGs, and SDGs are good for the sea. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Dr. Felix Ado-Yobo, we thank you very much for those warm thoughts, and I believe they'll be circulated via mail to each and every attendee. Shortly, we give to you a very marvelous gift to end the day. But before that, it falls to one amongst us to bring closure to all our deliberations. We're joined by a man who is a voice of reason and a moral compass in a world where all strive only toward profit. He keeps us on the straight and narrow by urging us to balance people, profit, and the planet in a very even way. He is the Omahene of Esikado Traditional Area, British 2nd D, in the western region of Ghana, a product of Infantsmem School, which I have a problem with. He looks like a fine Adisadel old boy. And a holder of PhD, he holds a PhD in African, let me take that again. He holds a PhD in African history from the University of Calabar, Nigeria. Currently, he is the chair of the advisory board of Water Aid Ghana, amongst many other hats he wears for Mother Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to give to you Nana Kobnan Ketia, the 5th Omahene of Esikado, for his closing comments.
For those of you who know me very well, like he does, they know that I'm not a protocol man. So forgive me. Quite recently, I was telling people that I can measure how much of my life has been sitting down and listening to Your Excellency this, Your Honorable this, and I look at my life, just listening to. So please, good evening. I've been having quite a good laugh sitting there. A lot of the things they were saying, and I sat down and I said, it's very difficult to be an African in Africa. When the young man, one of my sons, I think he's from the office of the president, said that Ghana is a net importer of something, I said, we are a net importer of ideas. Mainly because we don't look at ourselves. What do we have? And what can we build on? I came this afternoon really to listen to my very good son, who is the Rear Admiral. I always enjoy him. But I heard a lot. I mean, for this whole 2 days, I've really learned a lot. More about the other Africa and less about my Africa. You know, there are two Africas. Peter Ekes will tell you, Peter Ekes will tell you there are two publics. Most of you belong to the colonial Africa, so you live in coloniality. And I live in the other Africa. When the gentleman was talking about, I think Mr. Dixon, Dr. Dixon, was talking about that we don't look at the sea. I live at the sea. I look at the sea all the time. I live with fishermen. As of now, I'm even trying to learn the names of the stars. But they've forgotten them. How many of us know that Abrawana number is the Milky Way? And that when we say Yankopon de Bakwesikoto, much as we're talking about the scorpion, we're also talking about the Scorpio, the star Scorpio. My name, Nana Kobna Nketia, Nana Kobna Nketia, is a god of the sea. How can I have the name of the sea and not be interested in the sea? So traditionally, we've been interested in this thing, but it's just that the new kind of learning that is making us who we are as a tabula rasa, always putting institutions on us, makes us go without. And when my good friend there, the Ganja man, where is he? That was a great lesson today. But yesterday was really good, and today is equally good. And when I saw, in fact, the welcome address by Dr. Owusu really blew me. I said, whoa, we have Africans who think like this. You know, I was very surprised. In fact, when I got the invitation, I was even shocked. Office of the President inviting me for something like this. I want to sit in my village and look in the real. If you've never lived at the shore, on the coastline, you'll never know what poverty is. So when you're talking about this blue economy, we made so much noise about the hydrocarbon. And what has it done to us as a people? Who benefits from that oil in the sea? And yet the fishermen cannot go to, what's the name of it? Where Tullow, Cosmos, and the rest have their thing because they will damage the equipment there, in whose interest? So these are things that, hey, I'm seeing enemies here. So these are things that provoke thoughts, you know? When Lady Ingrid, sorry that I'm not used to saying excellency. I have a problem with the word excellency. I can't translate it into Fanti. So anytime somebody says it, I look at him like this. But on the more serious side, and she talked about how she loved the sea. She brought me home to my base, you know, because I know what the sea means to me and what it means to my people, and so on and so forth. So the challenge is also to look within. When the young man from the political office, when he was talking about the vision of the president, I said, but we are talking about West African coast. So isn't it a shared vision? If it's not a shared vision, then when another president comes, he will throw it away and go on with his vision. But that's how politicians talk. So I was laughing to myself. I said, when will we get out of this hole? But one day we will. That's where the hope lies. You know, talking about energy and so on, these days they use our head. I think they still call them our head, the engines. At first they used to use the mass, and they learned where were these stars, but now they use our head. So that old knowledge is being thrown away, and we must go back and rediscover them very fast about the sea breezes, where they go, and the time for fishing, and so on and so forth. All that is now being thrown away. Tuesday is my revered day, the day of the sea. And if you know the challenge that I have, trying to persuade the fishermen, don't go to sea. You'll be shocked. Because we are throwing the old things away. All in the name of what? Greed, money. So even the day that the sea has to rest, we say no. So almost the cases that come to the Traditional Council trying to create harmony is mainly due to those who go to sea at the wrong time. They deliberately do it, you know. So when we talked about the democracy, bringing people on board, democratization of awareness, we need to restructure our educational system in such a way that people become conscious of their environment and what happens to them. If they're not, then forget it. Because the whole education, the whole idea of education is be conscious of who you are within a particular environment. As I keep on telling my students when I used to be a teacher, all education is indoctrination. The best education is the indoctrination that makes you aware of indoctrination. Most of us get indoctrinated, and we are not even aware that we're being indoctrinated in somebody else's psychology. We need to re-look at ourselves. What do we want at the sea? If we want a blue economy, then we must respect the sea. If you want it. I keep saying that I'm an African. I'm such an African that everything here, you know, now they are learning these in quantum physics and so on and so forth. And when I hear the word Ubuntu, I am you, you are me, the whole universe is me, I'm the whole universe. When the chief sits in the upper can and throws his arm, Papo Bono, it is me. I am you, you are me. If you break a twig there, you are breaking part of me. Do we learn this? How have we treated the land? Whenever you look at Galamsey, and then you know that we're going to mine for cobalt, lithium, and all kinds of things, also at sea. And what drives us? Is it the benefit of ourselves, or is it the benefit of a few? When they were talking about the banks and so on, have we even defined a company from our cultural point of view? Anybody who defines the world for you controls your world. Anybody who creates an image for you controls your way of thinking, your image. Who and what controls the images and the definitions that you use? Whose economic books do you use? Are they yours? Or is it that, you understand what I mean, I don't want to make noise here. So this is the challenge that the blue economy has. I am the sea. I am the sea. If you mess up with the sea, you are messing up with me. You are the sea. I am you. If I mess up with you, you're messing up with me. For example, you're so obsessed with rights, as the lawyers will tell you, it's my right. No. In my traditions, it's my responsibility. The sea is my responsibility. You are my responsibility. It's about rights. There's somebody's culture that evolved from a feudal system. And in feudalism, you have what? The nobility, what do you call the others? The royalty, nobility, common man, peasant, slaves. And now that has been changed into upper class, middle class, and most of you here. Look at the space of Accra. We are even segregating it into rich areas and those of us who live in Choko. That is the problem. And we don't see it, that we are messing ourselves up with somebody else's thinking. So, for the beautiful things that you said, and I share with the young man who came in here and said, talked about the outcomes. Very positive. But there must be homegrown outcomes. If we don't grow it and make it our own, believe you me, these outcomes will even mess us up. Just like the hydrocarbons are messing us up. I come from the Western region, and I know what we are still flaring gas. In whose interest? Climate change. When we had COVID, I'm sorry that some people passed on, but for me, as somebody said here, it was time for introspection. COVID knew no borders. Climate change doesn't know any borders. We all survive or we die together. Nobody is richer than the other person, and that is the African. Why do I have wealth? Wealth is given to me so that I may use it to uplift my people. It's not for me to go and reserve it in a bank and see that, oh, I have 1 billion, 2 billion. I'm going to share some. If my people don't benefit from my wealth, then who am I? What am I? So this comes from having the introspection of who you are. What makes you African? That's why I said that in law, in the feudal system, they can talk about a lot about rights. But in Africa, we don't talk much about right. It is my responsibility. Every position that you are in, or you're Asuzi, let me use the fancy word. I'm not fancy, I'm a hunter. Or you're Asuzi or Asaze. How many of us see that? Most of what is happening to us is due to irresponsibility and selfish thinking. If we go on this way and we go on with the I-hood and not the we-hood, the sea would teach us a lesson. Because the sea is about we-hood. The sea is not about I-hood. The friendliest people are the fishermen. And that is why I know that my son is coming to sing. But when you listen to her life, you know, the Osode beats. Then you'll be jiving, you know. And it's because they love. And so on. It's beautiful. The Wabaham, and then after that, you see them jiving together. Fishermen, if you don't cooperate at sea, you never cooperate anywhere else in the world. So the Navy, let's support them. In fact, the word national blue economy is an antithesis in itself. Because they see, you're going to stop the Gulf Stream from your thing and go where? The fish that come. Where does it come from? We have national boundaries for tuna. So that's why we are forced to work together, to get together. And I'm glad about some of the things I heard, the West African coastline and so on and so forth. If those who've been mandated to put Africa together don't want to do it, the fishermen are doing it for them. And we will all do it for them. Indigenous Africa will do it for them. We want to be one, and the sea will bring us all together. Thank you very much for listening to my small English. I wish us luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can't do this sitting down. Help me celebrate our fearless leader, a voice of reason, and a moral compass.